I'm so pleased to be with you tonight to have a chance to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Regina Lewis. Dr. Lewis earned her doctorate degree in educational leadership, research and policy. She is currently a consulting partner, international speaker, and CEO of Regina Speaking LLC. Dr. Lewis is a war veteran who honorably served in the Air Force and is Professor Emerita for Pikes Peak State College. Her work in diversity and inclusion became an award-winning program, and her publications are found in books, journals, and educational textbooks. Dr. Lewis has been a time-honored facilitator for Parents Challenge and has served as a board member for 2 years. We are extremely excited to have her back to speak about her expertise on building relationships and communicating with your children. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Regina Lewis.
Well, hi, good evening, everybody. It's so good to see you. I've seen so many faces that I just remember, and it's just been fantastic. So we're going to be doing a little bit of work as we go along. You'll see your packet that looks kind of like this that you have. And tonight's talk is about reigniting, re-engaging, and reuniting with your children. Because what happens is that we get to a certain point and sometimes we want to give up. We just throw in the towel. We're like, you know what? I'm so done with you. I've been there. I have been there. As a matter of fact, I remember my son, you know, many of you've heard my story, and every talk I talk about my son Charles, and I'm going to talk about him again tonight. But you always hear all the great stuff about Charles. But Charles wasn't always easy. He wasn't easy. And that's something that I want to talk about. I want to talk about, you know, how did we, you know, get from here to here? In all these years, what took place, and even before this age. So I want to just share with you that there was this one time that my son had brought home his report card, and he did fabulous. He had gotten all A's and 1 B. And I said to him, I said, Charles, look at you. I says, if you just do a little bit more, you'll have straight A's. And he was so angry with me. He was like, I can't do anything. You know, like, no matter what I do, you think I should be able to do better. And he just kept on, and he said, I don't need you. You know it was a uh-oh. I said, oh, what? You don't need me? Okay, let's see how much you don't need me. And it was at that time that I was ready to throw in the towel. I was like, I'm done. I said, by law, all I need to do is make sure that you have a roof over your head, that you have clothes to wear. They didn't say how many sets of clothes, and that you have food to eat. And they didn't discuss exactly what food. So oatmeal became his friend. And he had, you know, a change of clothes that he could wash and go to the next one. And he was miserable. And it was killing me, but I was done. And this went on for just a little bit of time, and he looked at me and he says, I need you. I need you. I was like, I know you did. I didn't do that though. I was like, really? But inside I was like, Mama knew that, right? So I get it, I get it. But here's the thing. If I had truly given up on Charles, he wouldn't be where he is today.
All right, that's it.
And there's so much to the journey. When we give up on our children, then what do you expect them to do? They are being taught how to give up on everything in life. And so what do you do when you think, this just ain't it? I have to start either over or just stop altogether? Well, let's back up for a minute. Let's just figure out really what is going on. So I did provide some information for you in the packet, but I want to just share with you these pieces. First of all, we're talking about 13-year-olds and younger. The 13-year-olds and younger are part of the alpha generation. The alpha, which is amazing. I'm like, how did they get at the beginning? You know? But the alpha generation, those who were born between 2010 and 2025, is the first generation born entirely in the 21st century and will be the most tech-infused group to date. Their parents grew up when social media was being established. Their children are born with all the technology to date already at their fingertips. What does that even mean? If this is their life, how is it that we can tell them to get off of their technology? I mean, we can, but the reality of it is this is the world that they know. And here's something else. If we try to remove them from all of this technology, they actually will fall behind. I'm not saying that you don't have your children take a break, but what I am saying is that you have to realize what's happening. So let me give you an example. This was not Charles's generation, but he was in the generation where they were introducing technology, and I remember him being at the Air Force Academy, and they had job assignments, and they would open them up for half the year. And you had to go on there and decide which days you were going to do your job or whatever. Because there were several hundreds of cadets there. And what happens is the fastest people get the best slots. So I'm looking and I'm thinking, man, they got stuff on every holiday, which means that if Charles isn't fast enough, he will not be home for the holidays. So I'm watching him. He says, okay, they're going to open it up in just a few minutes, Mom. He had his watch, he had his phone, he had his iPad, and he had his laptop. And I was like, I'm going to watch this. I said, do you need some help? He was like, no, Mom. As soon as they opened it up, it was amazing how fast he could go through and get the schedule that he wanted. If I had said, no, you can't be on there, there's no way he could have kept up with that. There's no way. So I had to really understand that balance that we need to do at times. But who are we? You know, if this is our children, who are we? So I'm not going to read all this, but what I will say is when you look at Generation Y, this is, many of us that are in this room that's between age 28 and 43. Now, if you're older than 43 and you are a caretaker, then what is happening is that it's even more disconnected. There's even more things that were very different, and it truly, truly is. So when you start looking at this is the millennial group. This is the millennial group. And they grew up on technology as a way of life. And, this is where they just started. This is where it started to come in. These millennials, which are many of you, they grew up through the Great Recession, the explosion of the internet and social media, and the horrendous terrorist attack on 9/11. So let me tell you something about the millennials. The millennials have always lived in war. There's always been war. So then that means that you're extremely cautious. Wherein I'm a baby boomer, and it was after the war was over. We had it going on. We could do whatever. It was great. And then here you come, and it's like, we don't know a life without it. We have to be very skeptical. We need to be very careful. So when our children are saying, well, why not? I mean, I can get on here, or I should be able to do this, then it becomes a conflict. It really, really does, and it becomes concerning. As a matter of fact, I'm getting ready to do another training, and the debate is about roaming children, or what is it, free-range children. Anybody here are free-range children? Oh, So free-range children are now parents who believe that they should not have any guidelines for their children. They should be able to go wherever they want, when they want, walk across the street, do whatever, and it's mind-blowing to me. And the arguments are amazing when you listen to the different sides. And this is for children that are even younger. And if they're doing that, then who will they be when they're 13? What will that look like? And if you're saying, oh my goodness, that's absolutely crazy, that's because of the generation that you come from. Because again, we're trying to be protective. It looks really, really different. So it is important that we realize what is going on, what the concerns actually are. So here's a question, mainly for the millennials in the room, but really any of you could actually answer it. The first one is, how many of you waited to be married or lived with your partner before having children? Okay. She said most of, 69%, the research says that 69% of millennials did that. Very different from generations before that. Very different. Here's the next one. How many of you planned and or researched when it would be best time to have children? How many of you did that? Yeah, I know. I don't know. Mine was kind of in between. I don't know. 34%. You see how that number actually goes down. How many of you try to limit or keep your children off the internet? 75%. Do you see what's happening? Do you see how we're starting to have a disconnect already? This starts to give you an insight as to what is happening with your kids. So later on, I'm going to have short video clips of my son talking. And hopefully, with all the connections, we can hear what he says. If not, then I'll try to explain what he's talking about and where these disconnects actually come in. But in your packet, on that first page, it says, what is or will be your story? And your story meaning you and your child. What will be the future story? In order for me and my son to get where we are, come on back, to get where we are, then this has been a big issue. This has been part of the challenge that we had. But we had a story. But here's something to know. You can write your story about you and your child, but don't leave your children out of it. That means you've got to talk to them too, even if it doesn't make sense. We got to have that conversation together. That next page really goes into more detail about those two groups. So that's something that you can use. But I want you to look at the third page. I want you to write down or think of, if you don't have a pen or pencil, I want you to write down something you are proud of that you taught your child. What's something that you taught your child?
So I'm a 15-year-old, my son. I would say he communicates very well. He's very articulate, and I think that comes from us when he was little, having deep conversation and not just, I guess, like conversation, of course, at each level of his life or in the stage of his life at his level, but he learned to develop that. And so by the way I talk to him, he's really good at communicating with people.
Yes.
Feels.
Yes.
And that, I think, is kind of a heartbeat for a child. But I think that that's one of those really big things for me, because communication is very important.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share? What's something you were proud of that you taught? Yes.
I watched a lot of the albums and This Is My Life when it was on, and whenever there was episodes when mothers and daughters would say, does your daughter know your story as a woman? And as my daughters get older, to really tell her, the truth of things that have happened in real time, so she understands just some of that baby generational trauma, and baby generational awesomeness, the baby generational supreme awesomeness.
Yes.
Really encourage her not to do as I say, not as I do, but say I am you, and into her.
Oh, absolutely. That is really cool. Yes.
The value of hard work and trust to work towards dreams and goals one step at a time. I help them when I have a big dream. I help them identify where are you right now and what can you do right now, one step toward that dream.
Yes.
And then you take one more step because you need to take one more step rather than looking at it and saying, I can never achieve that, or it's just going to happen overnight.
Absolutely right. Exactly. Yes.
How to explore the world. So our young kids, we travel the world like our oldest daughter.
Yes.
Continue to do that. Yes. Engage with people from all over the world.
Yes. Yeah. See, these are really cool. And, when we start doing that, or when we started doing that, our kids thought we were cool. We start out being really cool parents, right? As a matter of fact, so cool that I remember that one of the big things that Charles and I used to do was go trick-or-treating. Anybody not know what trick-or-treating is? Okay, I'm just checking. But I will tell you, we would go trick-or-treating, and we would trick-or-treat until the people told us to leave their house because it was too late. And we would get so much candy, so when we get home, he knew he could select 20 pieces of candy, and then I would buy the rest for 20 bucks. And then I would just take it to work and dump it on the table because I just didn't want him to have all the candy, but we would have a good time. And I bought him the cutest little outfit. He thought he was cute, and I thought he was cute. He was a penguin. We loved this costume. When my son sees it today, he's mad. He is so mad, like, Mom, why? Why did you put me in that costume? But at the time, it was really, 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 really cute. And so I started thinking about what it is that I taught my child. Yes, we teach them responsibility, we teach them empathy, we teach them all kinds of things. But one of the things that I was really proud, and I guess because I was proud of myself too, was how to jump a fence and to climb a tree. I said, if a dog comes after you, this is how you do it. You grab it here, and you flip over, and I could do it. That's what made me so proud that I could actually do it. But those things happen. Those things happen. And then they grow up. They grow up. And I'm looking, and I remember when Charles went to the Air Force Academy, and they were yelling at my child. And I thought I was going to break the bus down. But there was something that changed. When you thought that everything was cute and everything was fun and your kids saw you as the hero, there had to have been something that changed. So later you'll have a little worksheet. You can work on this at home, just thinking about, these different questions. But the question for me is, what changed? What changed? My son and I would build tents. We had our own little library under the bed, with the flashlight. We did all kinds of stuff. But when you look at the research, it will tell you when the children start to see you as uncool. So you're not in this by yourself. Many of us go through this same thing. And some of us say, oh no, we're great, and you are, until they leave home and they have a taste of freedom. And then you wonder, why don't they call? Why don't they connect with me? And then you hurt. For my son, it was like this.
My dad is also in the military. He was a civil engineer, and he died when I was 8 in Vietnam, searching for the remains of POWs and MIAs.
You are now facing the death. The rebel and the soul. Oh my,
Yeah. You know, at the tender age of 8, his father died. It changed everything. He wasn't my little baby. He wasn't my little boy. As a matter of fact, he delivered the eulogy for his father's funeral. And I don't know if I knew exactly what to do, except try not to cry in front of him. I didn't know. But something changed. That was easy to identify. But for many of you, you might not know. You have to dig deeper to say, what was it? Was it when they started going to this different school and what somebody said? Was it something that happened that I just didn't notice? What was it? And then when we start to figure it out, how do we help them? Well, how do we help them? So I want you to think about something difficult you have had to teach your child, or maybe have to teach them one day. Something very difficult. I had to teach my son how to grieve, how to function, because just as quickly as his father was gone, I could be gone too. And if I didn't teach him, how will he know? He might figure it out. He may be lucky enough to have one of you to help him through that and teach him. But why don't I just take on the responsibility as the parent to do that? If we don't, or if we help them too much where they can't do it for themselves, they become weak. And it's hard to step back and watch your child go through that. We want to do it for them, but it's just like a butterfly. When a butterfly is in its chrysalis and it's struggling to get out, if you've ever watched one, it's painful to watch, because you're watching it trying to get out of this chrysalis, going from, being a caterpillar into a butterfly, and you want to help them. But what happens if you open the chrysalis and let that butterfly free? What would happen? They either will die or they would become weak, because that struggle, that push, the beautiful shapes, if you see the lines in the butterfly, those are the veins. So when it's struggling, what it's doing, it's strengthening and pushing the blood into the veins. So if you open it, it doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. So I remember taking my son to Arlington. And I remember him, before he went, he said, his band teacher called, and he said, Miss Lewis, your son isn't practicing. I said, what do you mean he's not practicing? I said, oh, he's practicing. He's supposed to be practicing his clarinet. And he says, no, he's not practicing. So I asked him, I said, Charles, are you practicing? He said, yes, ma'am. I said, now see, don't you tell me a story. He said, okay, I'll tell you. He says, I've been practicing by ear how to play taps to play at my dad's site, his burial site. Now I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to get him there? What am I going to do? I'm trying to figure it out. The pain was tremendous at that point. And I wanted to coddle him and say it's okay and come up with some great story. But he would not be the man he is today had I done that. And finally, after saving for 2 years, every penny and dime I could come up with, I got enough money to take him to Arlington. And when he walked down there, it was almost like he knew exactly where to go. His father was buried in the wall. And when he got there, he pulled out his harmonica and he played.
I hope to do all that. That's my goal. But the main thing is to become an officer in the Air Force.
My dad was also in the military. He was a civil engineer, and he died when I was 8 in Vietnam, searching for the remains of POWs and MIAs.
You are now basic.
You know, in my head, while I was standing there, I kept hearing it over and over again. So some of the things that I kept hearing was, my dad died, and he kept saying that. And then, you know, just thinking about his life, and it kept playing in my head over and over again. And I'm standing there and I want to fix it. I want to fix it. We can't always do that for our children. And I didn't. I let him grow. I let him go through some of the pain. And he wasn't always kind, but I didn't give up. I didn't give up, and that is something that we have to do. Reignite, reengage, reunite. What is R-E? Re is to repeat, to do it again and again and again and again. We, as parents, should be called re-parents. Because we got to do it over and over and over again with the same child. Same child. And the moment we give up, the world will give up too. And then we wonder how we got where we are. That's the big message here for you tonight, to understand that. You know, when we look at ignite, to ignite is to excite, to provoke, or trigger a situation. So when you're igniting, you have to make excitement again. How can you do that? Especially when we're generations apart. Engage, to get involved, to attract, to occupy. Not all the time. Don't be right here with your child, but you got to step in sometime and let them know that you are their superhero yet again. And then to unite is to join, to combine, to merge. Combine what they do with what you do. As a professor, so I retired, I call it rewirement, but when I retired in January from Pikes Peak State College, for those 20 years I had to move with the signs of the time. And where before the students weren't allowed to bring their cell phones into the classrooms, I started to use the cell phones as part of the learning experience. Look this up on your phone. Take your camera and walk around the college and take pictures of this. You know, pass this information over to someone else. So I had to find a way to merge, and I did the same thing with my son. So my son decided that him and his friend wanted to be cool. Oh, Lord have mercy. And they came out and they had gotten these fake grills, you know, the gold teeth, and they had the hat on backwards and they doing this number, and I'm like, Lord have mercy. That's not what I raised. But instead of just stopping him where he is and saying, no, you can't do that, I started asking questions. I said, man, I took pictures, oh, do it again. And they were, you know. I was like, okay. And inside I was like, I was like, all right. Told his friend, we'll see you later. Bye. And then I asked my son, I said, what were y'all trying to do? He says, we trying to be cool. We want to be rappers one day. I says, oh, okay. But I had to hear him. He wanted to be cool. So I asked him, I said, do you want to be 50 Cent cool or Usher cool? Made him think. And he says, Usher cool. I said, well, let's go get the clothes to be Usher cool. And I was teaching him along the way. I was still merging in with what he wanted, but at the same time, I didn't deny him of it either. Us having those conversations and finding a unique way is what's really important. But if we want our kids to really do well, poof, it's not going to happen just like magic. It's not. We can't do poof. We have to give them proof. We have to do the proof. The proof comes in many different ways. If you tell them they're brilliant, you better prove to them how.
What's wrong?
If they say, you know what, maybe I do want to be, I don't know, a fireman. Have their birthday party at the fire station. You know, like, open those doors, let them see that they can do it. And also let them see that you can work just as hard as them. My son watched that. My son saw that this is what I would do. So last year, I was asked to speak in Hawaii. So I flew out to Hawaii, and while I was there, I was able to go to the memorial where they had his father's memorial. There's one in Florida, there's one in Hawaii, and there's one in Vietnam. And so when I was there, I walk inside the building that says top secret, you can't come in here. But I'm Regina, you know, I'm going in there. So I go stepping in there. And they were like, ma'am, hold on, ma'am. I was like, do you know who I am? And they were like, we really care. But they started to ask me, and I explained to them what happened and who I was and who Charles's dad was. So they ran and got a 4-star general. And this general was talking to me. He was just like, oh my goodness. And he says, well, wait a minute, come with me. And he took me upstairs and he explained what the mission was. I did not realize that they have archaeologists all over the world that go to different war zones and they find body remains and other remains, and they have teams that go in, pick up these remains and bring them back. So now they have scientists in this building that starts to find the DNA to connect the families who never got to be with their loved one. And that's what his father was doing. So he was one of the ones that were going into Vietnam to pick up these remains, but unfortunately the plane did not detect the mountain in front of it, crashed and killing all 9 Americans and all 6 Vietnamese soldiers. So when I was standing there and he took me upstairs and he opened the door, ladies, you're gonna love this. They were all women scientists. They had on their lab coats and you could see the parts and this and that, and I'm just blown away. And then he went and told somebody I was there. And this guy came up to me and he said, you're Chuck's wife? And I said, yeah. And you said you have a son named Charles? I said, yes. He says, I got something for him. He went back and he came back and he shook my hand, because that's like the tradition when the military, they got a coin and they shake your hand, and he shook my hand. He said this was his father's coin. Make sure he gets it. I was like, unbelievable. So the next month, I was speaking in Arizona. But this time I was taking Charles with me and we were going to speak on stage together for the very first time. And I asked him, I said, man, if I say something that makes you upset, are you going to be okay? He was like, yeah, fine. I was like, he just don't know I got this coin. So we got there and I'm on stage and the people don't realize that I have Charles with me, because there's hundreds of people. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the speech, I looked over and I said, son, Mom would climb any mountain and swim any sea. And you could hear them like, oh my goodness, her son is here. Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah. And all of a sudden I said, could you come up? And when he came up, they're clapping and they're standing up, they're clapping. And we were like, okay, sit down for a second. And I started telling them about the tradition of a coin. And I took that coin and I said, son, this was your father's coin. And I shook his hand. And his knee, I mean, you could see him and he's trying to hold it together and he can't breathe and the people are roaring. They're just clapping. And I'm so mad that I don't have that recorded. That's why I got all this equipment, because I'll never miss a part like that again. But they're just clapping and going crazy. And when he finally could speak, this was the first time I got to hear his side of the story. And as he's walking through, I'm watching, and everything I taught my son and I modeled together for 18 years. I could see every bit of pride, every bit of pain. I could see everything. I mean, this brother was walking. I said, look at my child. And then he said this. Now let's see if we can get this thing going. So the first thing is one of the things that you can teach your child is to speak your dreams out loud.
What do you say?
Speak your dreams out loud. Now I don't mean go tell everybody, because if you do, they're going to try to crush them.
That's right.
But speak them out loud enough for you to start making it happen. Because what happens is, as soon as you say it, it starts to crystallize. And as you act upon it, it starts to be until it is. Because that's how everything happens. So this is what Charles said about speaking out loud. Let's see if we can make this happen.
Once I graduated from the Air Force Academy, I would tell people all the time, going back and teach the Air Force Academy. One thing that they always tell you is, grow where you're playing. Don't think about the next assignment. Do what you're going to do and do a regular route. But that's not how we've done things. That's not how my mom did things. That's not how she showed her. And so she, when she talked about telling people that she can go back to school, there were all those people that along the way were helping her to get where she wanted to go. And so for me, it was about being bold enough to say what I want to speak my mind. And so I would tell people, we're going to teach it. I'm going to do my job well right now, but that's where I'm at. And
So what my son is saying is that I'm the one that taught him that you speak it out loud. You don't wait. You make it happen for you now, and they don't forget. We didn't practice this. I've never heard him say that. But that came from him. What are you telling your children right now that's going to make a difference later in their lives?
All right.
If you tell them something negative, if you tell them that they can't, guess what? They'll believe it. If you tell yourself you can't, something my mother has always said is, when you say you can't, you're right. Don't say that. As easy as you can say that you can't, you can also say that you can. What is your dream? Make it happen. Begin by saying it out loud. You have to say it out loud. What is your dream? What is your child's dream? Help them to do that. And when they do, then you have to prove it to them. So here it is. I believe in consistency and consequences. If you say it, then your child should be able to bet their bottom dollar on it. And if you're not sure, then don't say it. If I tell my son, if you do A, B is going to happen, it's guaranteed to this day. So I didn't say things that I couldn't afford. I didn't say things that I couldn't keep a promise. But let me tell you what I see parents do. They'll say things like, if you pick up and you do this all week, then you can go so-and-so over the weekend. And then the weekend comes and they come up with a reason why they still can't go. That's not fair. They don't have anybody that they can trust. So being consistent is important. Despite it all, Despite it all, there are things that happen, but despite it all, we keep going. This is what my son said.
Teacher, Kathleen, talked for 2 years here, and I decided, despite seeing what my mom went through with her PhD, that I wanted to pursue a PhD, so I
So he saw that it wasn't easy. He did. Despite how hard it was for my mom, I still did it. You know why? Because I completed it. You have to prove it to your child. I can't reiterate that enough, that that's what you have to do. You are the one that has to show them. No one else is responsible for your child like you are. No one. And when all else fails them, they know that they have one person. And that's you. We all have hopes and dreams for our children. So what dreams do you have for your child? What dreams? Because here's what's interesting. Your child, and you might have dreams for your child. You've planned it even before they were born. Everything was perfect. And then they decide that's not what they want to do. What are you going to do then? Are you going to give up on them? Are you going to tell them that's the wrong thing? Let me tell you what my brother did. His daughter was really good at basketball. Every college I can imagine was asking for her, and she decided which one she wanted to go to. But that wasn't the dream my brother had for his daughter. And he told her no. She needed to stay close to home. My niece has had children, several different fathers, hooked on drugs, just had a whole life of struggle. And now she's 42 and she's just starting life, just starting. And it makes me wonder, what would it have been if she had been able to just do it? Just been able to go live that dream. So I had plans for my son. I didn't create them. He told me, so I was supporting it. He said he wanted to be an astronaut and he wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. And so because he said that, I was already trying to figure out, how do I get a cell phone from here to the moon? Because I just knew that's what it was going to be. We are going to be that. But here it is.
That presentation that she gave was so buttoned up that we have to send you. So after my second year, they sent me, and now I'm currently doing my PhD, and writing my dissertation, hopefully only more than that. But if I do have to do it 24 times on things like that. And this plan, and
so what he was saying there is that, he never wanted to get a PhD. That wasn't part of the plan. And once he started to say, you know what, I'm going there, he said, I don't think it's going to take me 24 times like it took my mom to write my dissertation. But he also said, but if it does, I watched her so that I know that I can. That was powerful. That was powerful. And I just wish that it would have come through, like you could really hear it. But these are words from him. And I thought, do I talk about my son throughout this whole presentation? Yes. I'm talking about my son because I'm talking about your children. I'm talking about what he went through, and I'm giving you proof that this isn't just coming from me. This is coming from him himself. What was instilled in him. And when you do that, you don't know who's watching. You don't know how it's going to impact someone else, but they see you. There might be something that you do that awakens and shakens somebody else to say, if they can do it, We can do it too. This summer, I received a text message from a young man. And he said, Dr. Lewis, years ago, my mom heard your story. And she heard how you made a deal with your son that you were going to go back to school and you were not going to stop until you had a PhD, and you were going to get it before he graduated from high school. But he had to get into the academy. I got my PhD 6 days before my son graduated from high school, and then he got into the academy. And after this young man contacted me and told me that, he says, my mom remembers a picture of you and your son. You are running down the 16th Street Mall in Denver, and you have on your cap and gown, and you go to pass the baton of education to him, and he's behind you catching it like this. And he said, my mother from that day said, that will be me. I will be going back to school, and I will be passing to you the baton of education. And she did. Yes, she did. What lifelong lessons are you teaching your children? It made everything I did worth it. When I saw this picture, I sent it to my son. He's got it hanging next to the ones that we have together. He said, Mom, it made it all worth it. And he and I have planned to go to this young man's graduation when he graduates in California. We'll be there. We'll be there. That's how we pass it on. Y'all, we're all one family. We have to do it, because who else is going to do it for us? No one. And what you do, people are watching. They're watching you. That was I can't even begin to tell you. So you can't talk about it. You gotta be about it. You gotta be about it. Go to school. If you go to school, then they can see how to study. Because who else is going to tell them? If you go to school, they're going to see that you'll sit up late nights when you would rather go to sleep, or you'd rather go to the movies or something else. Stop a bad habit. I remember a young man and his father. His father heard my talk, and he said, and he was doing, I had a scholarship. It was called, what was it, Action Pack Challenge. And, you know, he said, as the father, I'm going to stop drinking. And his son said, and when he does, I'll go to college.
Oh my goodness.
And I hadn't heard from him, but here I was teaching first morning. You know, I had these little mints, you know, those little peppermint patties. And when the students would come in, I would say, you are meant to be here. I thought I was so wise. And then all of a sudden, he comes in. And I went to hand it to him, and I looked. He said, my father stopped drinking.
No.
And I'm in college. And I was at his graduation too. This is how it happened, y'all. Reignite. Make it different. When you teach your child, don't just teach your child how to do something, tell them why. Tell them why. I remember, you know, we weren't allowed to ask why. I went to it was accolades, and it was an award ceremony last week. It was a luncheon. And while I was there, Jackie Joyner Kersey, she runs track. She was there and she spoke. And she said a quote that went perfectly with what I'm trying to say. She had told us some things. She said, those who know why always beat those who know how. Because when you know how, if it don't work, you don't know what else to do. But if you know why, you always will. You always will. So teach your children why. That's going to ignite them. That's going to engage them. That's going to create more curiosity. They want to know. You know, sir, you told me that you are in taking your children and introducing them to different cultures, different people. That right there is now giving them the why. Why we need to be inclusive. Why we need to care about other people. Why we need to know something more than ourselves. We have to understand those pieces, and it will make a difference in their lives. Don't you know we're doing diversity training? People are paying thousands upon thousands of dollars to do diversity training where we could have done it at the age of your kids, so they already know why. Because otherwise we're leaving everybody out. It doesn't make any sense. So when we start doing that, that is where it's going to make a difference. I was born in Puerto Rico. My dad was in the Army. When we left Puerto Rico, we went to Baltimore while my dad was in Vietnam. When he came back, I was raised in Taiwan. I was using chopsticks and rice cookers in the 70s. Folks didn't know what was happening. Neither did I. But I was learning all of that, so by the time I came back to the United States, I was doing this. This was just a natural way of doing things. But what it did was it helped me to be connected with other people who were not like me. Last month, I had 9 dignitaries come to my house from China. And I have a lot of authentic Chinese stuff in my home that they noticed. As a matter of fact, one was telling the other, "This is real Chinese tea." And I knew what he said. I said, "Ha bu hao ni hao ma?" What? And I just felt good because I had that, and that came from my father. That's what's happening with your kids. That's how it's done. So we can stop being so divided in this nation. The things that you are teaching your child right now will impact them in the future. My proof is my own child. He's speaking of that today. Next year, this time, my son will be Dr. Lewis, Major Lewis. And it's because of what I've been instilled. What we want to do is make sure that what we instill in our children and how we ignite them over and over and over again will take them and move them higher and further than we've ever been.
What you say?
That's where we want to be. My son bought his first home before I ever even thought about a home. What are you doing? I'm telling you, if you don't hear anything else from me, hear this. Don't give up on your children. Just don't give up on them. And when you're tired because they are hard-headed, first of all, stop and think, why? What is it that we weren't doing? What is it that we need to start doing? That makes the difference. Remember, we cannot just make things magically appear. We must show our children. You be the proof in the pudding. When I said that I was going to go back to school, I wanted my son to see firsthand what it is to be disciplined, dedicated, and determined. And for those of you that don't know, when I went to school, I was in my 30s. I couldn't read, I couldn't write, and I had to go and sit with 7th and 8th graders, but he watched me do that. He saw that I didn't have so much pride that I didn't do it, or too much fear that I couldn't do it. Be afraid. Go walk into it so that your child or your children know what to do, thank you, know what to do when they need to walk into fear. We are the teachers. We're their first teachers. Let it be that. We cannot just tell our children they can. We must prove that they can. How are you proving that to them? I have a little cousin. She looks like about this young lady's age right here. Yes. And she's got a lemonade stand. And her mother's, letting her sit out there and do her lemonade stand and everything. But we have to prove to her that there's some value in that. So next month we're gonna have our family reunion, and we're having the lemonade stand, and we all gonna get in there and pay. See, so she can learn the value of herself. So we have to prove this to our children. These are the things that makes a difference. I don't know why that went like that. Don't just tell your children how to do something. Explain so they understand why. Take the time. How many of you, and you don't have to raise your hand, but think about this. How many of you come from the struggle? In other words, you grew up in poverty or in poverty now. Like struggle. I know I was. And when you come from that place and that space, what we have learned is that we are concrete thinkers. Let me tell you what a concrete thinker is. A concrete thinker is a person that thinks about the here and now. They're in the here and now. They are the ones that are struggling. But they have to deal with right now because tomorrow's not promised. We got to deal with what's here. And unfortunately, that's how we raise and teach our children. Imagine this. You are walking across the street with your child, and all of a sudden the child lets go of your hand and runs out into the street. You snatch them back and you tell them, don't you ever do that again. If you do, you're in trouble. What did we teach our child? That if they run out in the street, they're in trouble. But a person who can take a little bit more time, who's not a concrete thinker, will say, if you run out into the street, a car may hit you and you could be terribly injured. We are now building critical thinking skills for our children. I can't tell you how many students I've had that did not have critical thinking skills because they were never taught at home. And the only way to teach that at home is to tell the why, to explain, not just have an instant answer. It is my hope that as you go through this package yourself, that you start to really think about, what are you doing? I want to identify a couple things that I want you to do as I wrap up today. That last one, I talk about the proof, not poof. Don't just talk about it, be about it. What are you showing your children, and what will you show your children? So not just what you're showing them, but what will you be showing them? Write down one dream you have not spoke out loud. What is one dream that you have? Because as long as you don't speak about it and it's a dream, then you're still asleep. Wake up. Write down a dream or goal that you have for your child, and how will you adjust if their dream is not your dream? Write down something that you do that your child can use as a life lesson. Sometimes we have to tell them things that you've kept a secret. This will help them to grow. It's been my honor and a pleasure to talk with all of you tonight. And I hope that you have a little nugget that you can take with you about how to reignite, reengage, and reunite with your child. Thank you.
Man, she sure talks about her son a whole lot. Guess what? That's what you should be doing with your children as well. Because if you're not, who else is? You should be proud of your most important assets. Asset for some, assets for some others. Your children get beat up in life by others. They don't need to get beat up by their parents, their guardians. They need to know that you're proud of them. And yeah, They're knuckleheads sometimes, but they are yours. And we have to make sure that they know that you're proud of them, even if nobody else is. And I love it when Dr. Lewis, Dr. Martin is up here, amen, and the whole thing. So, but Dr. Lewis talks about her son, because I've known her for a long time, so I've seen this journey that she's been on and continue to be on. And I'm just as proud of Charles as she is, and he ain't mine. But I've been there with her, and she's been there with mine. And by the way, this is Dr. Lewis's mom, sitting right here. So take time to go through that packet. Answer those questions. Don't take these sheets and just put them on a shelf somewhere and say, oh, done my mandatory session, I'm done. Take time to let your children know how important they are to you. Okay, so what's next? Okay.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good evening again, excuse me. At the bottom of Regina's introduction, Dr. Lewis, excuse me, is the QR code for your evaluations. If you wouldn't mind taking time to complete the evaluations on your phone. That way you don't have to do that later. Hopefully everybody's completed all of their evaluations. Since you guys are platinum families, you have the option to do the community service or not. If you decide that doing sessions, doing paramedic sessions is the best thing for you, you may go ahead and leave. But
Okay. Just so that we provide clarity regarding platinum families, we have two options this year. You can either do your 6 sessions, and you can still do 6 sessions anyway, or you can participate in our community service project that we're going to do as an organization. So on October 7th, go ahead and pass those out. On October 7th, we're going to have 2 options available. First one is we're going to help with the tiny home project. And they're going to be doing some outdoor type things, getting the tiny homes. So let me tell you a little bit about the tiny homes. My daughter actually works for them, but that's not why we picked it. We picked it because it's a great community project. So if any of you've been to the Switchbacks, going south, there's a whole little tiny home village. And the tiny homes are about 200 square feet. And they are for young people between the ages of 18 and 24 that are either transitioning out of foster care or they've been homeless. And for many of them, this is their first time they've ever had their own place. So the goal of it, this is transitional housing, so they can live there for up to 2 years. They pay $600 a month to live there. And during that time, they set goals, they get connected in the community, and therefore, so that they can become productive, contributing citizens. So the project that we're going to help them with is to get their grounds all finalized and prepared for the fall. So they're going to have about 18 of these homes. Right now, I think they've got 12. And they're bringing in the additional ones. They're going to bring them in, and all of these young people, again, have either been homeless or they're transitioning out of foster care.
I actually know somebody that lives with them, and she was a foster kid, and it has made it, she also has some disabilities, and it has been so life-changing for her. Like, she went from being a foster kid that was basically illiterate when her foster mom got her, 4 years ago, and now she is actually able to go to college. So,
Yes. So that's going to be one of our projects, and it'll be from 9 to 12 o'clock. And then the other project is we're going to be helping the Pikes Peak suicide prevention to put together packets for young people. Is it just young people? Or they're coming out of inpatient care, and we're going to be putting together care packages for them. And that'll be from noon to 4 o'clock. So you as a family have an option to do one of those choices or none of those choices. But we want to just find out so if you don't do this, these are our only 2 options that we're going to do this year as Parents Challenge, because we're going to do them as a group. So if you are interested in participating in the community service project, then we're going to ask you to stay. But before you leave, there's 2 things I need each family to do, to take tonight. 1, take your star, and 2, there's some stationery. Just told you about the potential $1 million donor. But we're going to have an event in October to show appreciation for all of our donors. We need some letters, and we need good letters, not letters that just say, thank you for your support. We need you to write your story, because they read them. We created plaques with the stories in them, and many of those donors have put those on their walls, because that's something that they can't get in a mug or a pen or a cap. But to have a personalized letter from a family telling them why Parents Challenge has made a difference in their lives, that's priceless. So please, take a sheet, take multiple sheets. You can do more than 1 letter. We appreciate that. But we need you to help us to put together some letters that we can provide to our donors. Any questions on that?
Do you want us to do them now?
No. I don't want you to do them now. I want you to be thoughtful and take your time and then mail it back to us, or drop it off at our office, or bring it to the next in-person session. We need to get them before October the 18th. So you've got plenty of time to do it. So if you're coming to a session, or if you're coming to the volunteer piece, you can bring it then. So if you want to participate in the Cause I Love You, their program, I need you to stay. If you are going to complete your 6 sessions, and that's what you want to do this year, you are welcome to leave. And those who are going to do the project, we need you just to stay so we can just go through a couple things.